running through yards and vaulting over gardens, watching the sunlight spackle driveways through trees, turning cartwheels on the sidewalk, drawing with chalk elaborate pictures and hopscotch grids. My friends and I ran the streets of our neighborhood. Now, sometimes we would depart from the checkerboard of lawns for the ravine. A hill dipped downward until you found a creek at the bottom. And we would run/fall down the side of this rocky hill, sometimes getting bruised and scraped as we went all the way down. The creek at the bottom seemed to beg us for our interaction. Sometimes we would hop across stones from one side to the other. Sometimes we would run and take a leap to reach the other side. Sometimes we would break into two separate groups and pretend our lands were divided by that gentle flowing water. Sometimes we would also turn over stones. And we would turn over these stones and look for tiny poking gray heads and claws of crawdads, or the silky bodies of green and black garter snakes. Yes, all of that was down there. Nothing seemed to ruin our primal love for it all, this magnetic draw to be in and around these tiny parts of nature that had been left untouched by suburban development. A few months or a year later, time gets blurred when you're trying to remember your childhood. I was running with my friends through the neighborhood, and it had just rained, and each tread on the grass scattered dew droplets everywhere. Lining the streets were newly planted sapling trees pointing like index fingers up towards the sky. And one of my friends discovered it. He discovered that if you shake these sapling trees, water would rain down on you, hit your face as though it were raining, storming all over again. And so my friends and I made a game of it, running from one tree to the next, shaking it so that the droplets would spatter everywhere. And the next thing I know, I had grabbed a smaller sapling and was shaking it, perhaps a bit too hard. And that is when I heard it, the terrible snap, like a bone that had been splintered into. The tree cracked in half, and it sent a shock through my body. I had not been trying to vandalize anything, and yet some adult did see me do it and probably assumed otherwise. And he severely dressed me down in front of my friends. And I felt this surge of shame for the harm that I had caused. And I looked at the tree, and I thought that as a kid, there was really nothing I could do to repair it. I walked away, leaving its broken body behind like a corpse. Later that summer, near the ravine, my friends and I tied a braided rope to a high branch so that we could swing back and forth over the water. And each of us would take that rope, scale the side of the ravine, and then take a running leap in order to clear the water and swing up high on that rope. The thrill of adrenaline would pulse as we replicated the Tarzan cartoons. And efforts became more and more elaborate. We designed obstacle courses, leaping onto rocks and swinging from one side of the ravine to the other. The summer that we hung the rope, my hands developed thick red calluses, badges of honor for our games that we used to play. And occasionally, we would go down to that creek on our own. And this must have been what Sarah did. She went down on her own one day, and apparently the rope snapped in midair, and it left her sprawled on the rocks, bloody and covered in mud. She was okay, but she did have to get 8 stitches. And after that, her mother forbade her from going back down into that ravine with friends or alone. I would say that was probably the beginning of the end of our games down there. Now, many of us in late Generation X grew up with messages about the importance of protecting the environment. And one of the most memorable messages that were, specifically geared to us as kids was a Sesame Street episode. And it depicted a kid brushing his teeth, and he left the water running, which quickly drained a lake, leaving the fish without enough water to live and breathe. Others depicted the importance of picking up trash and leaving less of a footprint. And so sometimes with a parent or a friend, and sometimes on my own, I would try to gather up the trash that collected in that ravine. And so I would bring a bag down there, and I would find these scattered pieces of plastic and garbage that were scattered. When I looked at a natural landscape and saw it littered with random pieces of plastic, it felt like unacceptable discord to me, sort of like a bad note in a musical number. But perhaps my doing this in retrospect was also a form of eco-repentance, remorse for that broken tree. Perhaps I was trying to make things right with my little patch of environment there in that suburban neighborhood. We are never fully known, even to ourselves, and memory is especially murky when we send its tendrils back into childhood. What I do remember is one late summer day, I made my way down into that ravine. And this was after Sarah had been forbidden to go, and many of the other kids in the neighborhood had stopped playing down there. It was a liminal time. Many of us were growing up and our interests were changing. But on that late summer day, I wound my way down the rocky side of the ravine. I had no agenda to pick up trash. I just wanted to walk. Because for me, even if some of the games had lost their allure because of danger or because of changing interests, a part of nature still exerted that primal lure towards me. I took the path through the trees, and I walked along the stones that led over the stream. I passed a hidden fort that we had built with fallen sticks, and I had passed another place where a baby bird had fallen from a tree and broken its neck. We had buried it in that place. But I kept pushing forward, walking further down the ravine, and it was in turning a bend that I saw it. I saw it and I froze. I wondered if any of my friends had seen this or if I was the first. I wondered who had done it and when. Plywood and drywall and broken glass, an enormous pile of construction refuse had been dumped into the ravine. And I thought that even if I wanted to clean this, which I did, I would never have the ability on my own. I was struck with the disbelief of it. Didn't people see that this was a magical place, that it was a beautiful one? Hadn't they seen the rope and known that kids played down here? How could they be this uncaring? I can still see the side of it like a shard of glass trapped just underneath my eyelid. I went down there a few more times, and each time the illegal dumping had increased. A few months later, for unrelated reasons, my family moved away, and for all I know, that beautiful natural patch of land is still covered with garbage. Like the turn in the bend that revealed the refuse, this sermon has taken a turn for me. When I first started to think about these early experiences and what I wanted to preach on for Earth Day, I thought that I would end on a joyful note. That even when I felt loss and knew about destruction, it paled in comparison with nature's joys. And nature does still give me an abiding sense of joy. But having remembered these things and trying to be true to them, trying to be honest with them, I am not sure that joy reigns triumphant in that story. In fact, I know it doesn't. When I look back at those early experiences, I have this abiding sense of loss and contamination. As far as I know, that ravine is still filled with trash. And I've decided it's not honest to put a smiley face on that. In this era of species extinction and climate change and the great trash continent that we have created in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, maybe it's wiser not always to rush to joy, because I know that I feel a lot of sadness when I contemplate those things. And I also feel shame at having contributed to these changes that are taking place to the natural world. Now, a part of me shies away from sharing the fullness of that because I get it. Nobody comes to church to feel bad. I know I don't come to church to feel bad. I know that many of you don't either. But I also want to be honest, and I want to be true to our experiences of the world right now. And so my message today, and maybe I'll just word it more as a question, my message might be, what if it's okay to just feel all of it? What if it's okay to feel all of it? To know that you are welcome here feeling all of it on this Earth Day, knowing it's okay to be real and true with the feelings of loss and sadness and grief. We do not have to put a happy face on disaster, and we can know that in showing up here. I know that this is part of my hope for religious community, that we can be real with each other, that we can be true to our experiences, even if they are broken and hurting and wounded, that we can be real with each other. We can be honest about what has been lost, about the parts of the human experience that break our hearts in two. We can be honest about the parts of our past that still weigh on us. We can be honest about the brokenness that we see in the world. We can lament the trash that is filling the ravine. We can say with the poet, now my grief is complete at my failure to do absolutely everything. It's true that some of us might have a life that is just too full right now to contemplate such loss. And I want to tell you that it's okay to be in that place too. We're not trying to force anything. We're also not trying to hold anything back. Instead, we're trying to tenderly hold all of it. We sometimes forget that the deepest resources in our religious traditions are not always about praising life and finding joy. A lot of them are, it's true, but not all of them. Many religious traditions also hold a place for lament, for genuine feelings of sadness over what has been lost. And it is important to remember that contained within that lament is also hope. Like a bud in April, sadness can hold within it the possibility of healing and new life if we are honest with it, if we treat it with respect and hold it tenderly. Because when we are not running from the pain, the world is always offering new opportunities to love it into wholeness. The land mourns and languishes. The land cries out for our gentle hand.